Even in an alternate version of the 1980s, all roads lead to Reagan. Drew here, and For All Mankind is back with the second season. And I watched the trailers for this, anticipating this season arriving since I quite enjoyed season one. And I'll have to say, for some reason, it just completely missed my brain that they were skipping forward 9 years. And it's an interesting choice. I think it gives this show a lot of epic scope. I enjoyed the first season, as I said. I think that it has a lot of elements that appeal to casual TV viewers like me who are just looking for gripping entertainment. But I also think it has a lot of, I've been told, I'm sure some people may feel differently, but I've been told that it has a lot of those elements that appeal to sci-fi fans who are looking for more realism in their depictions of space exploration. And it's got this interesting twist that it's in an alternate history where the Russians beat the US to the moon. But a quibble I have with this show, I'm curious to see if this season goes in a more aggressive direction with its alternate history. Because to me, season one, oftentimes I feel like the alternate history just seemed like an excuse to kind of fictionalize some aspects of America's journey to the moon. And obviously, this show has America developing technology that it never developed, and it, portrays the Cold War going to the moon in a way that it never really did in real life. But I have to say, for a lot of it, I just kept thinking, well, the only thing that is really different in this alternate history is that you have a slightly more woke NASA at a slightly earlier time. Because, we did eventually get female astronauts anyway. So, to me, there was a lot that wasn't differentiated that much from our real history. And, there's this really interesting opening montage in this premiere episode, Every Little Thing, that kind of sets the tone, and it's showing how the last 9 years have gone and how, there's all these small little details that are different from the real history of the world. For instance, you have Duchess Camilla actually marrying Prince Charles, and you have John Lennon not getting shot, things like that. But to me, it's like, well, that's interesting, but it's also like, well, you're just saying, well, this didn't happen in this history, and this didn't happen in this history, and this didn't happen in this history. And when you rattle those things off like that, without really any rhyme or reason, I don't know that it really adds that much. It's not that creative. Like, I could just rattle off a couple things that didn't happen in this alternate history. For example, in this alternate history, Star Wars won Best Picture, and Rocky didn't. You can just basically do that, and it doesn't take that much creativity to pull off. So overall, I feel like I'd like to see them take a more aggressive direction with this alternate history. I know that playing with the Cold War, they probably don't want to go too far with that and actually have people embroiled in violent conflicts on the moon, but I kind of feel like they should. We'll see where they go with this. I think one of the most interesting aspects of the show is because we don't know what will or won't happen in this alternate history, since it's different than the history that we live in. It's kind of like experiencing the Cold War the way that people that actually lived through it experienced it, not actually knowing what's going to happen next and feeling that sense of urgency as a result. I had a little bit of a concern in this episode that the melodramatic and soapy aspects of the show are kind of overwhelming the sci-fi concept a little bit. I think that you have to develop the characters, obviously. I enjoy a lot of these character dynamics and relationships. But to me, for instance, what's happening with Tracy Stevens, it could happen in any show. And maybe there's more to it than I'm seeing, but it just kind of feels like a way to pad the runtime and to just kind of, I guess, reach out to a broader audience who is interested in these kinds of elements. But to me, it's like this could happen in any show. It doesn't really need to be in a show about an alternate reality where the Russians beat us to the moon. How does this play into that unique concept? I thought it was an interesting decision. Last season, there were a lot of things that happened at the end of the season, such as the death of Edward and Karen's son while he's away on the moon. I thought it was interesting to have this time jump 9 years forward because, as Joel Kinnaman kind of discussed in an interview, you don't really see any signs of the grief that you know he must have experienced at that point at the end of season 1. And we never really got to see him and his wife deal with it together. It seems like they've kind of moved on and they've adopted a girl named Kelly, played by Cynthia Wu. And they seem to be a just well-functioning and happy family unit at this point. And it's interesting, I assume that they're going to kind of show how he dealt with his son's death at some point in this season. I think it's an interesting decision to have him no longer being in space and to see him grounded, and instead of being, an astronaut, again, he's in charge of the programs. And it's also interesting to see the increasing militarization of NASA under President Reagan, who, despite the fact that this is an alternate history, still ends up being president. In the first season, they had, Ted Kennedy become president because he didn't get assassinated. And you had some other, political situations that were different than what happened in actual American history. So it's all very interesting, but Reagan still ends up president. Lastly, just when this episode, it seemed like a very subdued premiere, just kind of letting you catch up with the characters a bit. They've added some new additions, but none of them really stood out to me so far. But just when I thought this episode was going to be relatively subdued, we got some tense moments at the end, which are honestly my favorite part of the show. I like the life or death aspects, and I know that, every space mission to a certain extent was life or death, but this show manages to amplify the drama with a lot of situations that never actually occurred in reality. And here we have a solar flare creating a dangerous situation for astronauts on this moon base, and also creating a dangerous situation down on Earth as it causes satellites to stop being able to monitor the nuclear powers, which puts both Russia and the US in this position where they're tempted to launch a preemptive strike because they don't know what the other is doing. So, watching that element play out was interesting, and this is where I feel like you do get to see what the Cold War was like for people actually in it, because in this show, you assume nobody's going to nuke anybody, but you really don't know because anything could really happen in an alternate history. And it's a really interesting thing to see play out. I thought that the scenes on the moon this episode were really well realized, as they have been consistently in the show, particularly in the later episodes of season 1. This show can feel networky at times with the writing. Some of the ways that they have characters say things that that they already would know and would not really feel the need to express can feel kind of clunky. But overall, I did think that the writing was pretty smooth this episode. But the ending of this episode, pretty tense, as these astronauts rush to get back to the moon base to get cover from the radiation from the sun's solar flare. And we get to see this sequence with Molly Cobb as she's trapped out on the lunar surface because she doesn't have time to get back to the base in time. And the way this scene played out, I was a little confused. They have these watches that show when they've been exposed to too much radiation. And she gets to this cave and she's safe, but then she sees that one of her fellow astronauts has been stranded out on the lunar surface. And she waits until the radiation from the solar flare has landed on the moon, and you can see it, the dust kind of getting disturbed by it, and a very visually striking shot. It's a very handsomely mounted show. If you haven't watched it, I would check it out for that reason alone. And she waits until this happened. I feel like she waited in the cave a couple minutes, and then she goes out and to rescue her colleague, waits until the radiation shows up to do that. I feel like this seemed like an odd writing decision. I feel like they were trying to amplify the drama, and having her go out after it had already started was more dramatic, but I feel like she would have at least started out, even if she knew she was going to get caught out in it, I feel like she would have started out before it came down based on the way that they've portrayed this character. So it seems like she's very likely to have received far too much radiation to survive, and we may be about to witness her slow death from cancer or some other sickness. So very strong character, I think possibly the strongest female character in the show. I'm enjoying all the nostalgia, all the little differences are interesting, but I feel like, I can't help but feel like they could do more, and I'm hoping that they do go in a more aggressive direction with the alternate history aspects before this season is over. But let me know what you thought in the comments. If there's things that they got wrong from a scientific perspective that you know of, let me know. I'm always interested to hear that, even though I will have no idea what they are, because I am a casual TV viewer and researches into this kind of stuff. I don't feel like TV should have too much homework, but if you're willing to point stuff out to me, please let me know. I don't know how well these reviews are going to do, so I'm not 100% committed to reviewing this show all the way through, but I will be watching it, so keep letting me know your thoughts as other episodes come out. It's hard to say, you know, Apple TV is one of those streaming subscription services that's having to just basically give their service away to keep subscribers right now. And I'm not sure if shows like this, if people knew how good they were, would pull more people in or not. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.